Tony Soprano's story begins in the suburbs of New Jersey, opening the door to a life that appears ordinary, but is actually filled with storms. The camera shows Tony for the first time in the waiting room of a psychiatrist. A large, heavy-built man with a stern gaze, yet carrying a strange tension. He is the head of the Soprano family in North Jersey, one of the most powerful figures in the mafia's shadows. But we first see him here, waiting at a psychiatrist's door. That alone signals from the very beginning that this won't be just another mafia story. Tony enters Dr. Jennifer Melfi's office. This session will become one of the turning points of his life, because Tony can no longer carry the tension he has held inside since childhood, the burden of leadership and the pressures of the criminal world. For the first time, he is forced to open up sides of himself that he has never revealed to anyone else. His first words pull the viewer directly into his turmoil. He describes experiencing panic attacks, suddenly collapsing, and feeling like he couldn't breathe. "It was like my heart was about to stop," he says. Right from the start, it becomes clear that behind the strong facade lies a fragile, conflicted soul. As Tony speaks, the scenes take us into his world. While he talks to Melfi, we are drawn into his mind. He describes how watching ducks in his backyard filled him with peace, but how deep anxiety struck him when they flew away. It seems like an ordinary incident, but it's actually a symbol of Tony's connection to his family, his children, and his fear of losing them. "When they flew off, something inside me broke," he admits, realizing the emptiness within his own life. The next scenes take us into Tony's daily life. At breakfast in his kitchen with Carmela, his loyal but tough wife, he appears as a family man. Carmela doesn't question his business directly, but she is fully aware of the dangers his lifestyle brings. At the table sit their children, Meadow, on the brink of rebellious adolescence, and AJ, still innocent but growing up under his father's shadow. As Tony leaves the house, Carmela reminds him, "Going to the doctor was good." She knows Tony has been restless for a long time. His therapy sessions might be the family's only glimmer of hope. Out in the world, however, Tony wears another face. For him, family splits into two, the one bound by blood and the mafia family. The latter consumes the rest of his day. Here we meet his right-hand man, Silvio Dante, his close friend, Paulie Walnuts, and his ambitious nephew, Christopher Moltisanti. Christopher and his friend Brendan stir trouble by getting involved in unauthorized business deals, threatening Tony's authority. This reveals Tony's leadership style, harsh enough to scare but strategic enough not to lose people entirely. He scolds Christopher but doesn't cast him out completely. In the mafia, balance is not kept solely with violence, it's about steering the uncontrollable. Another challenge in Tony's business world is his uncle, Corrado Jr. Soprano. Jr. is an aging but still influential leader whose authority constantly tests Tony. With dismissive remarks like, "You were still a little kid," he tries to undermine Tony's leadership. This tension will fuel much of the conflict in the coming seasons, and its sparks already appear in the pilot episode. Meanwhile, Tony's mother, Livia, steps into the picture. Cantankerous, dissatisfied, and endlessly complaining, she is perhaps the hardest person in Tony's life. He tries to find her a nursing home, as her old age makes her impossible to manage. But Livia stubbornly resists. "Don't you dare send me there." Her emotional pressure plays a major role in Tony's panic attacks and fragile state of mind. As the episode continues, Tony's therapy deepens. Dr. Melfi realizes that Tony's fixation on the ducks reveals his attachment to family and his fear of losing them. Tony tries to deny it, but his eyes betray him. He is caught between two poles, a mafia boss and a fragile father. On one side, the mob's demands. On the other, family troubles. Tony's sisters, Janice and Barbara, also appear in the picture, often clashing with him, especially over their mother, Livia. One of the pilot's most crucial scenes is Tony's panic attack resurfacing in a business setting. During a meeting, he suddenly collapses. Everyone panics, but Tony tries to cover it up with just low blood pressure. In the mafia, showing weakness is fatal, and Tony knows it. By the end, Tony's world becomes fully drawn. A father devoted to his children, a son in conflict with his mother, a leader fighting for control at work, and beneath it all a fragile soul. As the pilot closes, Tony's inner conflict becomes most strikingly clear. The way my generation ends, it's going to be weird. Guys like me will end up in a psychiatrist's office. The episode ends by showing both Tony's power and fragility, inviting the audience into a journey far deeper than just a mafia tale. The Sopranos is not only about crime, it is the portrait of a man's soul. Tony Soprano's world stretches from a quiet suburban home to the back streets of New Jersey, weaving a complex web of mafia dealings and family tensions. In the first episode, we were introduced to his panic attacks and his therapy sessions with Dr. Melfi. Now, in the second episode, we see Tony's two different fronts, work and family, clashing even more harshly. The episode opens with Tony's struggles in dealing with his mother, Livia. He is trying to place her in a nursing home, but Livia, with her stubbornness and constant complaining, continues to push his patience to the limit. A small kitchen fire in her house becomes the last straw for Tony. It's no longer safe for her to live alone, he thinks. But convincing his mother is close to impossible. Livia snaps at him with fury. "You might as well put me in the grave." This conflict with his mother is at the root of Tony's inner anxiety. On one hand, he is a son who wants to protect his family. On the other, he is a leader forced to make ruthless decisions in the criminal world. This contradiction will deepen more with each episode. Meanwhile, the problems stirred up by Christopher and Brendan grow bigger. Both young, ambitious, and reckless, they have started hijacking trucks without Tony's permission. One of those trucks actually falls under the protection of Uncle Junior Soprano. Without realizing it, Christopher and Brendan have challenged Junior's authority. This becomes a major headache for Tony, who must maintain the delicate balance with his uncle. Christopher, desperate to prove himself, seems to say, "I can rise too. Give me a chance." But Tony is frustrated by his impatience and carelessness. In the mafia world, uncontrolled ambition only brings disaster. Tony scolds him. "You're only thinking about yourself, not the family." Brendan is even more reckless, treating the truck hijackings as fun. But this kind of fun will soon have deadly consequences. One of the episode's pivotal moments is when Junior openly warns Tony. He tells him bluntly, "Your kids are messing with my business." Tony is forced to both rein in Christopher and not lose Junior's respect. This dual tension will become a recurring axis in the series. During this time, Tony takes his mother to a nursing home called Green Grove. The place is actually safe and luxurious, but for Livia, it feels like exile. Tony tries to reassure her, "There are people your age here. You won't feel alone." Livia, however, twists her face and accuses him, "You just want to lock me up." The scene shows Tony as a ruthless mob boss who can order bloodshed, but as a helpless son, he cannot control his own mother. His psychological conflict feeds on this exact duality. As Tony deals with mafia problems on one side and his mother's resistance on the other, nothing goes the way he wants. Christopher and Brendan continue to rob Junior's trucks. This time, things spiral out of control. Junior orders his men to send a message. Brendan, intoxicated with alcohol and drugs, is killed in his bathtub by Junior's men. Christopher, meanwhile, is harshly intimidated. This brutal scene demonstrates how indiscipline in the mafia world can lead to fatal consequences. Tony, torn between protecting his nephew and appeasing Junior's wrath, is left in a precarious position. The episode also gives more insight into Carmela's perspective. She is caught in the middle of Tony's struggle with his mother. On one hand, she supports her husband's decisions. On the other, she endures her mother-in-law's bitterness. Through Carmela's eyes, we see even more clearly how trapped Tony is both at home and in his business. Toward the finale, Tony meets Dr. Melfi for another session. Once again, the roots of his panic attacks are discussed. Tony begins to link his conflict with his mother, his lifelong emotional emptiness, and the pressures of his criminal life. Melfi's calm questions make him open up further. Tony admits, "I have to be strong, but there's something inside me constantly dragging me down." This line sums up the chasm between his two lives. By the end of the episode, Tony still appears outwardly as a strong mob boss, but the audience knows that inside, his fragility and family conflicts are pushing him harder and harder. Junior's rising threats, Christopher's recklessness, and the never-ending battles with his mother all together make Tony's life increasingly complicated. It is one of those cool spring mornings in New Jersey. Tony Soprano begins the day once again caught between two different worlds. On one side, caring for his family. On the other, keeping the balance in his mafia family. And the pressures on him are only getting heavier. The episode opens with a glimpse into the daily life of Tony and Carmela. Carmela shares her worries about the children's education, especially Meadow, who is under great stress preparing for college. But Tony's mind is elsewhere that morning, with his old friend Jackie April Sr. lying in a hospital bed. Jackie is battling cancer, and the whole family feels the shock of it. His illness also opens the door to questions of leadership within the family. In his sessions with Dr. Melfi, Tony begins to open up about these feelings. Jackie's illness reminds him of both the fear of loss and his own mortality. Melfi tells him that his suppressed emotions turn into anger. Tony resists, but deep down he knows it's true. On the mafia side, things are anything but calm. Junior still insists on asserting his authority. He is particularly disturbed by Christopher and Brendan's truck hijackings. Junior confronts Tony directly, saying, "There is such a thing as respect in this family." Tony faces two options: submit to Junior's rules or let the conflict escalate. Christopher, meanwhile, grows more impatient. He desperately wants to prove himself to Tony, but his poor decisions only dig him deeper. The young man's ambition for power is destabilizing the family. Brendan is even more reckless, and in this episode his carelessness marks the beginning of disastrous consequences. At home, Carmela faces her own crises. Her scenes with Father Phil, the Catholic priest, stand out. She finds a kind of emotional comfort in his presence. With Tony often absent, Carmela feels increasingly lonely. These moments foreshadow her inner struggles that will unfold later in the series. Another significant moment comes through Meadow and her friend Hunter. The two teenage girls are under intense pressure from school, worried about their upcoming exams. Meadow's thoughts of using drugs to ease the stress will put Tony and Carmela in a difficult spot. Tony sees his daughter's growing rebellion, but doesn't know how to respond. On Junior's side, events grow harsher. Junior has completely written off Brendan and targets him to cement his authority. This terrifies Christopher, while Tony is forced to both protect his nephew and calm his uncle's fury. As the episode progresses, Tony's anxieties build. Jackie's hospital scenes cast a dark shadow over him. Jackie speaks as if saying, "My time is up," and Tony feels both the pain of losing a friend and the uncertainty of his own future. During sessions with Dr. Melfi, these feelings become even clearer. Jackie's illness forces Tony to confront his own fragility. But for a mob boss, admitting that vulnerability is almost impossible. By the end, tension has piled up on all fronts. Junior's growing demand for authority, Christopher and Brendan's recklessness, Meadow's defiance under school pressure, Jackie's declining health, all of it weighs on Tony like a nightmare. The episode closes with Tony sitting alone in his backyard, his face weary. Outwardly, he is still the strong boss, but inside, holding together his family and his own balance becomes harder and harder. Early in the morning, as the sun slowly rises over the quiet suburbs of New Jersey, Tony Soprano faces another complicated day. Inside the house, Carmela prepares breakfast in the dim kitchen, while Tony wrestles with last night's nightmares. The shadow of his panic attack still lingers, though he hides it. Carmela glances at him as if to say, "You didn't sleep well again." Tony frowns but says nothing. Even in the first hours of the day, the clash between his two worlds begins. Being the head of his family at home and the boss of his mafia family outside. That morning, Tony also thinks about his children. His son AJ has been in a fight at school. This reminds Tony of his own youth, growing up tough under his father's shadow. He wonders what path his son will take in this world. Meanwhile, Meadow appears with books in her arms and a tired look on her face. She is studying hard for exams, but the family's tensions weigh on her. Carmela tells Tony, "You should listen to Meadow more." Tony stays silent, knowing that his words alone cannot ease her worries. In the business world, a reckoning is approaching. Jackie April Sr. remains in the hospital, fighting cancer. His illness raises the question of who will take leadership. Tony knows the responsibility will fall to him, but Junior is eager to assert his dominance. In this episode, the seeds of their conflict are sown more clearly. Junior belittles Tony within his circle, saying, "Tony is young. My word still counts." These remarks quickly reach Tony. Though he keeps a cold face, anger brews inside. Junior's insults affect not only business but also family. Tony doesn't tell Carmela, but at night the thoughts keep him awake. The heart of the episode is Tony's therapy. In Melfi's calm office, the contrast with his dark inner world is striking. She asks him about his dreams. Tony squirms, reluctant to share, but then speaks of a dream in a cemetery, with shadows of his father, memories of childhood, and glimpses of his future. Melfi says, "These are reflections of your unconscious struggles for power." Tony shakes his head. "Sometimes the pressure is so strong, I can't breathe." She points out it is linked to repressed anger and grief. Tony doesn't want to hear it, but the words echo within him. In the mafia world, the wounds left by Christopher and Brendan remain open. Junior is still furious at their recklessness. Christopher tries to prove himself, but Tony sees through him. Your ambition is clouding your judgment. Brendan, on the other hand, has already paid the ultimate price for his carelessness. This deepens the family's crisis of authority. At home, Carmela faces her own temptations. During Father Phil's visits, she finds solace in his presence. They share wine and talk. Carmela pours out her soul. She tries to fill the emptiness left by Tony's constant absences. When Tony comes home, he senses it. The look in Carmela's eyes stirs his anger, but he says nothing. He knows what she needs, but also knows he cannot give it. Meanwhile, Junior hardens his stance against Tony. Not only does he challenge Tony's authority, but he also pulls Livia to his side. Resentful toward her son, Livia draws closer to Junior. For Tony, this is a double blow at work and at home. Losing his mother's support leaves him hollow inside. Caught between these pressures, Tony chooses not to confront Junior directly. Instead, he eases off in appearance, while secretly reinforcing his own power. This balancing act is the only way to survive in the mafia world. Scenes of AJ at school underline the family side of the story. Forced to reconcile with the boy he fought, AJ sulks. Tony learns of it, looks at his son sternly, but then smiles, remembering his own youth. Some things are passed from father to son, he thinks. This moment shows Tony torn between wanting to pass on strength to his family and being haunted by his past. As the episode nears its end, Jackie's illness worsens. Tony visits him in the hospital. Jackie's frail state leaves a mark on Tony's face. Jackie's gaze seems to say, "Soon it will all be yours." Tony doesn't hear the words, but he feels them. In the cold hospital corridor, he pauses, lights a cigarette, and contemplates. The episode closes with Tony recalling Dr. Melfi's words. Denial, anger, acceptance. That is how people cope with loss. Sitting in his backyard, those words echo in his mind. Tony remains stuck between denial and anger, far from acceptance. Yet the audience knows these three stages will repeat again and again in his life. The camera pulls back, leaving only Tony's lonely silhouette in the glow of his house. He still looks like a strong mob boss, but inside he is a fragile man, fighting with his family, his mother, his friends, and his own soul. It is the early hours of the morning. A grey New Jersey sky hangs like a misty veil over the city. Tony Soprano sits in the driver's seat of his car, listening to the hum of the engine, while Meadow arranges her bag beside him. Father and daughter are headed toward Maine on a road trip. Officially, the purpose is to visit college campuses for Meadow. But for Tony, this journey carries another meaning: to get closer to his daughter and strengthen their bond. As the car sets off, Meadow gazes out the window, headphones in her ears. Tony watches her silently from the driver's seat. She is in the middle of adolescence. Her eyes are sharp, filled with both intelligence and defiance. Tony feels proud to see her growing up, but deep inside he worries. How much will his own identity shape the path she chooses for herself? On the road, Tony tries asking a few questions, but Meadow answers curtly. Finally, he breaks the silence with something more direct. "You know, when I was your age, I was already in the business." Meadow turns to look him straight in the eye. "Dad," she says, "I already know what you do." Tony is caught off guard. Meadow has pieced it together from friends, from the world around her. She knows her father isn't an ordinary businessman. Tony hesitates, then asks, "What do you know?" Meadow shrugs. "Enough." A heavy silence fills the car. Tony's mind races. Part of him wants to tell her the truth, but another part knows he must keep her away from that world. Meadow breaks the silence. "What matters to me is that you're my father. The rest, I'll figure out my own path." Her words leave Tony with a strange sense of peace. As the car winds along the roads of Maine, Tony's eyes suddenly catch sight of a face on the roadside. Recognition strikes him like a blade. Fabian Febi Petrulio, an old associate who had turned informant for the FBI years ago. Tony's eyes narrow, his grip on the wheel tightens. Without looking at Meadow, he thinks, "If I've seen this man here at this moment, it can't be a coincidence." A surge of rage wells inside him. The journey continues, but Tony's mind is split. He tours campuses with Meadow, asks her about her future, but behind every smile, his thoughts drift back to Febi. His face shifts constantly, warm and fatherly when he looks at Meadow, cold and full of hate when his eyes go distant. While Meadow chats with students at a campus, Tony excuses himself and returns to the car. He considers calling Paulie for backup, then shakes his head. This was his burden to settle. This betrayal had to be avenged with his own hands. By evening, father and daughter check into a small motel. Meadow retreats to her room. Tony slips into his car and quietly tracks Febi's whereabouts. The man appears to have built a simple new life under a new name in a small town. But to Tony, he is still nothing but a traitor. Through the night, Tony wrestles with his conscience. He had promised Meadow this trip would be about them, but the boss inside him cannot forgive betrayal. By morning, his decision is made. Dropping Meadow off at campus, he mutters, "I've got a little business to take care of." Meadow shoots him a knowing glance but asks nothing. Tony drives toward Febi's hideout. Down a narrow path in the woods, an old trailer marks Febi's refuge. As Tony approaches, Febi freezes in terror. "Tony, I never meant to hurt you," he stammers. Tony's face is expressionless, years of anger carved into his silence. Slowly he pulls a gun. Febi begs, "I had no choice." Tony's mind flashes with images. Meadow, Carmela, his mother, and then he pulls the trigger. The silence is broken only by birdsong. Tony turns his back and walks away. That evening, over dinner with Meadow, his face betrays nothing. She smiles at him. He smiles back. Inside, storms rage, but seeing the trust in her eyes keeps him steady. The episode closes with Tony sitting in the motel room, staring out the window, lost in thought. Pride and love for his daughter pull at him from one side, the dark weight of his violent world from the other. Tony Soprano's life is defined by this thin line between family and business, love and hate, peace and brutality. In the early hours of another day, Tony Soprano wakes from a dream, drenched in sweat and gasping for breath. Sitting on the edge of the bed, faces swirl through his mind. His family, his uncle Junior, his therapist Dr. Melfi. Reality and dream blur together. Carmela comes to his side. "Another nightmare?" she asks. Tony doesn't reply, but his eyes give it away. Even at dawn, his inner battle has already begun. At breakfast, the family appears ordinary. Carmela setting the table, Meadow and AJ busy with their own routines. Yet Tony's mind drifts elsewhere. Carmela notices and teases, "Thinking about your doctor again." Tony stays silent. What he cannot say is that he feels an attraction he cannot suppress toward Dr. Melfi. Therapy was supposed to ease his burdens, but instead it exposes his vulnerability. Meanwhile, in the mafia world, the balance of power is shifting. Jackie April Sr.'s illness worsens, and leadership officially falls to Junior Soprano. Junior is now the family's boss. The decision wounds Tony's pride, because everyone knows he has the strength to lead. Still, he allows Junior to take the title while holding the strings from the shadows. But Junior's rise sparks new frictions within the family. Junior asserts himself with arrogance, speaking loudly at meetings, belittling Tony's associates. He keeps Polly and Silvio at a distance, dismissing them. Tony shows no outward reaction, but inside he simmers, knowing that the real authority rests with him, not Junior. Christopher grows increasingly restless during this period. Junior's authority unsettles him. He craves Tony's approval, diving into reckless schemes. But Tony warns him, "This business isn't done in a rush. You need to wait your time." Christopher sulks but has no choice but to obey. In therapy, Tony struggles to open up. The quiet of Dr. Melfi's office forces his suppressed feelings to the surface. She asks about his dreams. Tony avoids admitting his attraction, but his words hint at it. "Sometimes I feel like I want to tell you everything." Melfi keeps her professional composure, though she sees the look in his eyes. Tony squirms in his chair, sweating, one of his most vulnerable moments. At home, Carmela senses the change. She sees another woman in his eyes and feels a quiet anger. "You've grown distant from me," she accuses. Tony denies it, but his face betrays the truth. Carmela's tears deepen the emptiness inside him. Junior's authority brings new rules, redistributing profits in ways that hurt Tony's close circle. Paulie and Silvio complain about his harshness. Tony tries to calm them, but he himself is close to boiling over. Junior's actions threaten not just business, but Tony's reputation. Visiting his mother Livia, Tony finds no comfort. As bitter as ever, she mocks him upon hearing Junior has taken charge. "So the family still listens to its elders," she says with scorn. The words cut deep. All Tony ever wanted from his mother was a little approval, a little warmth, but she gives only criticism. He leaves, lighting a cigarette, his face tight with rage. In this episode, Tony's dreams take on greater weight. In one dream, he sees Dr. Melfi, her voice soft and sweet. The dream turns erotic, and Tony wakes drenched in sweat. His subconscious reveals the depth of his feelings, but he can never speak of them. As Junior flaunts his power, Tony's patience wears thin. At a meeting, Junior proclaims, "The rules are mine now." Tony remains silent, but his eyes grow cold, signaling that Junior's dominance will not last forever. By the end, Tony sits once more in Melfi's office. This time he is more direct. "Sometimes, I think I feel something different for you." Melfi is caught off guard, but replies professionally, "These feelings are common in therapy. They are called transference." Tony lowers his head, but inside a storm brews. At home, the distance between Tony and Carmela widens. Over dinner, the table is silent, save for the clinking of cutlery. AJ and Meadow chatter, but Tony and Carmela don't look at each other. An invisible wall separates them. As the summer heat slowly settled over New Jersey, tension was brewing inside the Soprano household. In the kitchen that morning, Carmela prepared breakfast while AJ's restless footsteps echoed across the floor. The boy had been silent ever since a call came from school. Just days earlier, he had been disruptive in class, defying his teachers. Disappointment showed clearly on both Tony and Carmela's faces. For Tony, AJ's behavior stirred both anger and worry, because it reminded him too much of his own childhood. He too had been rebellious, defiant, unwilling to follow rules. Tony tried to talk to his son, but the words caught in his throat. "When I was your age, I also—" he began, then stopped. His memories were not simply about mischief at school. They were about his father's harshness and the looming shadow of the criminal world. Tony's eyes drifted away, as if scenes from the past were replaying like an old film in his mind. Later that day, sitting in Dr. Melfi's office, Tony opened up about these memories. Melfi listened intently as Tony spoke of his father, Johnny Boy Soprano. As a boy, he had idolized him, but also feared him. "My father's shadow was everywhere," Tony admitted, "but there was no peace under that shadow." His voice trembled slightly. This episode was Tony confronting the memories that had shaped who he had become. Flashbacks followed. Young Tony, not AJ, but Anthony in his youth, appeared on screen. The streets of New Jersey in the 1960s, old cars, kids on bicycles, the corner grocery store. As Tony played with friends, the sudden sound of sirens filled the air. Police cruisers sped by, and soon after, Johnny Boy's silhouette appeared. Young Tony began to see his father differently, both a hero and a figure to fear. In another flashback, Tony as a child stood in the shadow of his mother, Livia. Even then, she was bitter, critical, and impossible to please. Instead of affection, she lashed out at him constantly. "You'll never be anything worthwhile," she sneered, words that pierced his heart like a thorn. As Tony recounted this memory to Melfi, his eyes glistened but no tears fell. His tears long ago had already dried up. In the present, Tony's attempt to address AJ's discipline problem became a confrontation with his own past. Driving his son home from school, he tried to reach him. "What you've done may seem small, but when you grow up, if you keep going down the wrong path, you'll find the wrong people." AJ stared blankly, unaware of the weight behind his father's words. In his son's eyes, Tony saw both innocence and a reflection of his own youthful recklessness. For a moment, hope flickered. Maybe AJ could choose a different path. Meanwhile, the mafia side of the story remained in the background, though Junior's shadow still loomed. Tony tried not to bring that tension home, but Carmela sensed it. "When you're with your son, I can see something else in your eyes," she said. Tony offered no reply because she was right. He was thinking not just of AJ, but of his own past and his uncertain future. Throughout the episode, Tony wrestled with two voices within him: the hardness his father had instilled, and the sense of worthlessness his mother had etched into him. He looked at AJ and swore he wouldn't repeat the same mistakes. But deep inside, he knew the shadows of the past were not easily erased. One evening, as Tony sat in the backyard, AJ approached. "They were unfair to me at school," the boy complained. Tony took a drag from his cigarette. A heavy silence hung between them. Then he placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "Life is unfair sometimes," he said quietly, "but the choice you make is about who you stand with." The words reflected not what Tony had done in his own life, but what he wished he had. Another flashback appeared. Young Tony watched as his father, Johnny Boy, was taken away by police. His chest tightened, but his eyes stayed fixed on the scene. That moment carved his fate. His father's world had already begun to shape his destiny. Near the end, Tony sat again in Dr. Melfi's office. "I want my son to be different," he confessed. Melfi asked, "Could you have been different?" Tony lowered his head, unable to answer. He knew the truth. What he saw as a child, he became as a man. But perhaps AJ still had a chance at something else. The episode closed with Tony sitting alone in the living room. The television was on, but he wasn't watching. His eyes were distant, his face heavy with sorrow. From the backyard came the faint sounds of AJ playing. Tony stubbed out his cigarette and closed his eyes. In his mind, one thought echoed like a prayer. May my son not become like me. The camera pulled back, shrinking his silhouette amid the glow of the house lights. Inside him lived suppressed rage, the ghosts of his past, and a fragile hope for the future. One of New Jersey's misty mornings. In the Soprano kitchen, Carmela hurriedly laid out plates while Tony sat folding his newspaper, his face shadowed more by unease than calm. Rumors were spreading through the city. The FBI was preparing a major operation. Raids on multiple homes seemed imminent. With a coffee cup in hand, Tony's silence was heavy, torn between protecting his family and maintaining his responsibilities in the mob. By the time he got into his car, the worry had not left his face. His first stop of the day was Dr. Melfi's office. In the quiet of that room, away from the storm outside, Tony began to speak. He didn't say, "Are they coming for us?" outright, but the fear beneath his words was clear. Melfi pointed to Tony's obsession with control. "You want to manage everything, but life unfolds in ways you can't dictate," she told him. Tony grimaced. In the mafia, losing control didn't just mean failure, it meant death. Later, the entire mob crew gathered. Paulie, Silvio, Pussy. Even Junior was tense. The only subject at the table was the FBI. Tony's voice rang out. "Clean your houses now. Guns, records, anything, hide it or destroy it." Heads nodded, but the worry remained etched on their faces. No one knew who would be targeted. Meanwhile, Christopher was fighting a different crisis. Restless, he was desperate to prove himself, but underneath his anger lay something else. The urge to write. Screenplays, stories, dreams of Hollywood. "My life is like a movie. I have to write it," he told Adriana. Yet whenever pen touched paper, all that came out were lines soaked in rage and violence. One night at a bar, he exploded in front of Tony. "I don't have a story, Tony. You do. Paulie does. Everyone does, but mine? Nobody tells it. I don't exist." Tony stared at him for a long moment. Then, with a heavy voice, he replied, "Your story will be written when the time comes. But first you have to live." Christopher lowered his head, though the storm inside him did not settle. Carmela, meanwhile, fought her own battles. She organized the house, hid valuables, prepared for the possibility of a raid. But her real fear was for Meadow and AJ, that they might be caught in the middle of it all. One night she confronted Tony. "We have to keep our children out of this mess." Tony sat in silence, unable to answer. She was right, but he had no idea how to make it happen. Then the FBI moved. Black cars filled the streets, agents standing with lists in hand. Carmela's heart pounded as she peeked through the curtains. Tony's house seemed to be next in line, but that day no raid came. The rumor alone was enough to fuel the fear. Christopher's turmoil deepened. One day he showed Adriana his pages. "Look, this is my life," he said. She skimmed through, smiling faintly. "Maybe you really should write a script one day," she said softly. But the emptiness inside Christopher only grew. He saw himself as nothing more than a small figure in a big mob story. He wanted his own name to become a legend. As the episode unfolded, Tony's inner struggles sharpened. Junior's pressures, the FBI's shadow, Christopher's frustrations all converged at once. At night, Tony tossed in bed. Carmela noticed. "What's on your mind?" she asked. Tony closed his eyes. Everything spinning out of control was all he said. Toward the end, Christopher confronted Tony again, his eyes burning with anger and desperation. "When will my story be told?" he demanded. Tony's reply was slow and deliberate. "If you're not patient, never." The words carved themselves into Christopher's face. His hunger for glory and his impatience would define much of what was to come. That night, Tony sat alone in the backyard, a glass of liquor in hand. He gazed up at the stars, searching for peace, but the weight he carried was heavier than the night sky. The FBI's threat, Junior's shadow, his fragile family, Christopher's cries, all pressed down on him like stone. As the camera pulled back, the house receded into silence, the night swallowing Tony's solitary figure. He was still the most powerful man in North Jersey, but also just another human being struggling with fear, family, and his own conscience. Another misty morning in New Jersey. Tony Soprano sat at the kitchen table sipping his coffee. Carmela moved quietly around the kitchen while AJ rubbed his sleepy eyes. But the silence in the house that morning was deceptive. Outside, a new issue concerning the family was beginning to take shape. Meadows' soccer team had been drawing attention with their success throughout the season. The coach was being praised by everyone, and even Meadows seemed more connected to her school thanks to him. But behind the scenes, rumors were starting to darken the picture. While Meadow and her friends practiced on the field, whispers spread about the coach. One girl's family claimed he was involved in an inappropriate relationship. Word quickly reached Carmela. That evening in the kitchen, she turned to Tony. "Have you heard the talk about Meadows' coach?" Tony looked up in surprise. "What talk?" Carmela frowned. "They say he's into the girls on the team." The words froze Tony's blood. He wanted no such shadow over his daughter's life. The next day, Tony went to the field. While Meadow dribbled the ball, he stood on the sidelines and locked eyes with the coach. Tony's stare was hard, though he said nothing. Back home, he told Carmela, "I'm not sure yet," but sparks of rage were already flashing inside him. If the rumors were true, he would never forgive it. This episode was not only about the coach's shadow, but also about Junior's private life unraveling. Junior was having a secret relationship with Bobby, but one small detail Bobby shared with her friends turned into a source of great humiliation for Junior. She had mocked his behavior in bed, and the gossip spread quickly, eventually reaching Tony's ears. One night, while Tony sat with Paulie and Silvio, the subject came up. Laughter filled the table, and a sly smile crept across Tony's face. The rumors about Junior's private life cast doubt on his authority. Tony seized the opportunity, mocking him with pointed remarks. Junior's face flushed red, his lips pressed in anger, but he couldn't openly fight back. It was a new dimension in the rivalry between uncle and nephew. Meanwhile, the gossip about the soccer coach continued to grow. When Meadow told her mother, "My coach is different, he cares about us," Carmela's eyes welled up. She wanted to believe her daughter, yet feared the rumors might be true. Tony decided to handle it his own way. He had the coach watched for several nights. When the truth began to surface, Tony's fury exploded. There was indeed some truth in the rumors. One afternoon on the field, Tony confronted the coach. His words were sharp, his stare icy. "If you ruin my daughter's life or any of her friends, there will be no place left for you in this world." The coach staggered back, speechless. In Tony's eyes burned a dark rage. At that moment, the coach realized the man before him was not just a parent, he was one of the most feared men in New Jersey. On Junior's side, the rumors grew more humiliating. Tony's mocking jabs pushed him to the breaking point. One evening, Junior cornered Tony. "Are you making fun of me?" Tony smirked. "I didn't say a thing. Everyone else is talking." Junior's jaw clenched with fury. The tension between them escalated. As always, Carmela was caught in the middle. She wanted to protect her daughter, but also feared where Tony's rage might lead. Meadow, meanwhile, still trusted her coach and couldn't understand her father's reaction. Tony chose not to tell his daughter the truth, but to protect her in his own way. Later, in a session with Dr. Melfi, Tony unpacked both issues, his instinct to protect his daughter and his endless conflict with his uncle. Melfi observed, "Sometimes showing strength means hiding your feelings." Tony was shaken because it was the perfect summary of his life. By the finale, Tony's position was clear. The coach would never again come near Meadows' life. Junior, meanwhile, burned with humiliation, but still couldn't move openly against Tony, because he knew his nephew's power, both in the family and the mob, was only growing. Morning meetings continued as usual. Tony, Paulie, and Silvio gathered around the table with money, ledgers, and hushed conversations. But Tony's mind was elsewhere. He kept thinking about a golf game invitation he had received recently. A group of wealthy businessmen had invited him to their private club. Outwardly, it looked like an ordinary invitation, but for Tony it opened a doorway into a completely different world. On the golf course, the men in suits greeted him with fake smiles. They knew his power in the underworld, but treated him more like a curiosity than an equal. Their questions carried a mocking fascination. Is the mob really like in the movies? Hearing this unsettled Tony. He longed for respect, but in their eyes he was just an exotic story. On that golf course, Tony felt a different kind of loneliness. Meanwhile, Christopher's story veered in a new direction. With Adriana, he decided to dabble in the music business. Adriana's friend was managing a small rock band, and Christopher thought he could profit by backing them. Inside the studio, the air crackled with youthful energy. Guitars, drums, cigarette smoke. For a moment, Christopher imagined himself under the stage lights. His ambition shifted. He didn't just want to rise in the mob. He wanted to be a legend in the music world too. Adriana encouraged him. "These kids have talent," she said. Christopher nodded and pulled out cash, choosing to invest in the band. But the venture turned out to be far messier than he imagined. The music world, like the mob, was ruthless, full of ambition, betrayal, and shattered dreams. One night in a club, Christopher and Adriana watched the band perform. The crowd was enthusiastic, but Christopher felt something was missing. Still, the excitement in Adriana's eyes gave him courage. Maybe this will take me somewhere else, he thought. Meanwhile, Tony continued navigating his wealthy new acquaintances. They invited him to their homes, where lavish dinners and loud laughter filled ornate rooms. Yet Tony always felt like an outsider. To them, he was only the mob guy, never an equal businessman. At home, he confessed to Carmela, "They don't see me as a man. To them, I'm just some creature they're curious about." Carmela stayed silent, understanding his loneliness but unable to offer a solution. Christopher's music venture, meanwhile, soured. The record deal collapsed. The company executives cheated the young band, and Christopher's money was wasted. Furious, he exploded in the studio. "I invested in you and you made me a joke." Adriana tried to calm him, but the disappointment in his eyes was clear. What Christopher wanted was not only money, he wanted to prove himself as a creator. Instead, he was left with crushing failure. Tony's disillusionment also reached its peak. During a dinner, one of the businessmen cracked a condescending joke at his expense. The whole table laughed. Tony forced a smile, but his eyes were filled with rage. At home, he told Carmela, "They'll never see me as an equal." Carmela quietly nodded. She knew he was right. By the end, the two storylines ran parallel. Tony's rejection in elite society and Christopher's collapse in the music world. In different arenas, both were tasting the same bitter truth of never fully belonging anywhere. Tony Soprano sits at the kitchen table, sipping his coffee, his eyes staring into the distance. Carmela moves quietly around the kitchen, but it's impossible not to notice the tension on her husband's face. That day, the rumors spreading through whispers strike the very heart of the crime family like a dagger. The first to bring the news is Tony's close friend, Big Pussy Bonpensiero. According to what's being said, someone inside is leaking information to law enforcement. That means there is a rat within the family. Tony's mind spirals into chaos instantly, because in his world the word betrayal means not only rage, but death. Later, in a small meeting with Silvio and Paulie, the rumors are laid on the table. The air is heavy. Cigarette smoke drifts upward as everyone avoids each other's eyes. No one dares to say it out loud, but a single name hangs in their minds. Big Pussy. Paulie mutters, "There's something off about him lately." Tony's face hardens. Pussy has been one of his most trusted men for years. Losing him would leave a void not only in business but in friendship. This suspicion gnaws at Tony like a worm. Even when he returns home that evening, his mind is consumed by it. Carmela sets the table. Meadow studies, AJ watches TV. But Tony barely hears anything. The same thought circles in his head. If it really is him. That night, Tony goes to Dr. Melfi's office. Rain taps against the windows as he confides, "If I can't trust the people closest to me, what's left?" Melfi listens carefully, then asks, "What does trust mean to you?" Tony pauses, then whispers, "Survival." Because in his world, trust isn't just friendship or loyalty. It is the thin line between life and death. At the same time, another burden weighs on him, Jackie April Sr.'s condition. The news from the hospital is grim. His cancer has advanced, and it is clear that hope is slipping away. When Tony visits, he sits silently by Jackie's bedside. Jackie manages a faint smile as if to say, "Soon it will all fall on your shoulders." Tony's eyes well with tears, but he does not cry. His tears always flow inward. Meanwhile, Junior's patience wears thin. The whispers about a possible informant reach his ears as well. To Junior, these rumors threaten not only Tony but the family's entire security. He begins moving his own men. On the streets, the whispers multiply. Everyone pointing fingers, but no one knows the truth. Throughout the episode, Tony's expression grows heavier. When he looks at Big Pussy, his eyes linger too long. Pussy greets him warmly, reminiscing about old times. But the chains of suspicion refuse to let go. Tony doesn't want to throw away years of friendship over a rumor, yet he cannot ignore it either. This torment darkens his soul even more. Carmela senses it. One night, she tells him, "There's a storm inside you, but you won't tell me what it is." Tony only nods, because he cannot tell her the truth. If Pussy really betrayed him, he would have to eliminate him with his own hands. Later, Tony, Paulie, and Silvio speak at length. "If we can't trust anyone, what do we do?" Tony asks. Paulie answers harshly, "Then all we've got is us." The words are true, but they don't calm Tony's restlessness. Pussy's face keeps haunting him. Jackie's silence in the hospital only deepens the gloom of the episode. Tony holds his hand, sees both pain and acceptance in his eyes. As Jackie's life nears its end, the weight on Tony's shoulders grows heavier. In the final scene, Tony sits alone in his car. The night is drenched in darkness, rain running down the windshield. The engine is off. The only sound is the rhythm of raindrops. In his mind, the same thought echoes again. If it really is him? The camera pulls back, leaving only the loneliness of smoke-filled silence inside the car. The next day, as Tony drives, his eyes suddenly catch sight of a garden by the sidewalk. There a woman sits, a young Italian woman with long hair dressed in white. She smiles peacefully. From behind the car window, Tony feels a strange calm wash over him. The woman lifts her head and greets him. Surprised, Tony nods back. In his mind, she becomes a figure, a vision, maybe an illusion born from his subconscious. Her name is Isabella. That evening when he returns home, Carmela asks where he's been. "Just went for a drive," Tony answers. But in truth, his mind is still filled with the image of Isabella. Her serene smile feels like a sanctuary against the storm within him. Lying in bed, he closes his eyes and sees her face. When he wakes, she's still in his thoughts. The next day, Tony's depression deepens. He barely eats, barely speaks, sits silently at home. Carmela worries and considers calling Dr. Melfi, but Tony refuses. He carries a weight no one can share. Hoping to see Isabella again, he goes outside. And there she is, sitting in the garden chair, calmly reading a book, smiling softly. Tony approaches, speaking in a hushed voice. She answers in melodic Italian. In that moment, Tony feels like a child again, filling the void left by his mother's harshness and lack of affection with this imagined figure. But the shadow in Tony's life isn't only in his soul, it lurks in the streets as well. Junior and his allies have made a decision. Tony must be eliminated. The plan begins to unfold. Tony, unaware, walks straight into danger. One afternoon as he drives, another car pulls up alongside. Guns emerge from the window, bullets rip through the air. An assassination attempt has begun. Tony swerves instinctively, glass shattering around him. He barely survives. Amid the chaos, one image flashes in his mind. Isabella's face. Shaken but alive, Tony returns home. Carmela and the children rush to him with panicked questions. "It's nothing," he mutters. In his world, showing fear is weakness. Alone, he splashes water on his face and stares into the mirror. What he sees is both a powerful mafia boss and a man quietly falling apart. In his next session with Dr. Melfi, Tony is unusually open. "I saw a woman," he says. "She gave me peace." Melfi listens, then asks, "Was she real?" Tony falls silent. Deep down he knows. Isabella was a creation of his own mind, a refuge his soul had conjured. Melfi tells him, "She was the mother figure you never had. You've always needed that." For a brief moment, Tony's eyes glimmer with recognition, but then with anger he falls silent again, because his mother Livia's lack of love remains his deepest wound. The air in New Jersey feels heavier than ever, dark, tense, oppressive. When Tony Soprano steps out of his house that morning, the sky is overcast, the weight of the clouds pressing down as if on his own soul. The events of recent weeks, the assassination attempt, the threats closing in on his family, the unrest within him, all hang on his shoulders. As he gets behind the wheel, he feels Carmela's eyes on him. She can sense the anger and fear hidden in her husband's gaze, but says nothing. She knows well. In Tony's world, silences speak louder than words. That day, Tony visits Dr. Melfi. Sitting in the chair, his face is tired but hard. "They're playing me," he says. This time he doesn't hold back. "My mother and my uncle tried to have me killed." Melfi narrows her eyes but maintains her professional calm. "That's a very serious accusation," she replies. Tony's voice trembles with rage. "It's not an accusation, it's the truth." His hatred toward his mother merges with old wounds, scars from the love he never received in childhood, now twisted into betrayal. And Tony's instincts are right. Junior has plotted his death, while Livia watched coldly from the sidelines, almost amused. This truth cuts deeply into Tony. His mother, the unreachable figure of love, now stands before him like an enemy wishing him dead. Within the crime family, the tension is at a breaking point. Meetings with Paulie, Silvio, and Christopher are fraught. Tony slams his fist on the table. "We're ending this once and for all." Everyone at the table sees his resolve. This is not just business. It is a response to a threat against his very existence and his family's survival. As Junior's men move against him, the tables turn. The FBI steps in, shaking the streets with raids. Junior is suddenly caught in the government's net. When Tony hears his uncle has been arrested, his face shows a complex mix of emotions. On one hand, his enemy is neutralized. On the other, the collapse within his own family is a wound carved deep into his roots. Meanwhile, Livia is taken to the hospital. Tony walks the corridor slowly before entering her room. She lies in bed, her face marked by the same old dissatisfaction. Tony looks at her and speaks with a voice filled with both rage and hurt. "You wanted me dead." The corner of Livia's lips curls, almost into a mocking smile. "You've always been dramatic, Tony," she says. Her words stab his heart like a knife. The bond between them is reduced now to nothing but pain. One of the most powerful moments of Tony's fury comes during a long walk with Paulie and Silvio. Under the shadow of pine trees, he strides heavily, declaring, "No one is going to take me down." These words are not just defiance, they are his way of masking his own fear. For Christopher, loyalty and fear mix uneasily. His ambition still burns, but when he sees the resolve in Tony's eyes, he tempers it for the moment. He knows being close to Tony means both protection and danger. Later, Tony takes Carmela and the children out to dinner. After stormy days, they sit around a table together. The restaurant air carries a fragile sense of peace, but Tony's eyes never stop scanning the room. Danger is never far away. At one point, he raises his glass and looks at his family. "No matter what happens, you are everything to me," he says. Carmela's eyes fill with tears. Meadow lowers her head and AJ stares at his father in awe. In that moment, Tony's words reveal the vulnerability beneath all his toughness. The final scene shows Tony driving through a rainy night. The radio hums softly, raindrops streaking the windows. His face is weary but determined. His mother's betrayal, his uncle's plots, the shadow of the FBI, none of it has vanished, but Tony still stands. The camera slowly pulls back. His car disappears into the dark streets of New Jersey, leaving the audience with a single feeling. The story of the Soprano family has only just begun.